Welcome to this session on the linguistic implications in Panini's definition of Padam. In this session, the related ideas will be presented in four topics. First, there will be an introduction to the concept of word, followed by the views of linguists. Then, Panini's concept of Padam or word will be presented, highlighting the linguistic insights thereon. Finally, as a conclusion, all the linguistic implications in the definition of Pada of Panini will be briefly summarized. It is well known that all languages function in four levels: sound, word, sentence, and meaning. Word, the second level in language, has two forms, oral and written. In any language, word is the principal carrier of meaning. It also serves as an intermediate structure, bringing together the sound and the sentence levels of the language to communicate the intended ideas. That is, it serves as a building block in sentence construction. So, the study of this concept gains greater importance. With this introduction to the concept of word, let us now consider the view of linguists on this concept. First of all, what is a word? What is the definition of it? How can it be identified or to be probed? Though word in general is a language-free concept, yet words in different languages is language-specific. So there is no specific criterion for the identification of words in the languages. Due to ambiguity and a variety of manifestations of it as the prime locus of stress, pitch, juncture, and so on, defining it in a systematic way is not possible. So the term word as such is treated by linguists as unscientific. In fact, a set of theoretical linguists decided to set aside the notion of word altogether. If at all word can be defined, there are two main approaches. They are, number one, viewing word as a semantic unit. Number two, viewing word as an isolable and indivisible unit based on its possible boundaries. But none of these approaches help in a scientific definition of word. Let us now consider them. The first one is to view word as a semantic unit. For example, book, pen, etc. In all such cases, one word conveys a single object. Hence, defining the word as a semantic unit fits in well. But consider the following: book, books, work, 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 worker. In all these cases, there is a single word which conveys two meanings: the plural marker in the first, the past tense marker in the second, and the noun form of being an agent in the third. Similarly, there are also instances wherein two words convey one single meaning. For example, passenger train, goods train, school bus, college bus, tourist bus, notebook, etc. So word cannot be defined as a semantic unit. Similarly, consider the following: calf, cow, and bull. These three words refer to the same animal, but each of them add an aspect of being a baby, female, and male to those animals. So in all these cases, also a single word conveys two meanings. In similar consideration, elephant calf, elephant cow, and elephant bull. Here, two words convey one meaning. So, treating word as a semantic unit does not hold good. Further, word division does not correspond to meaning division. The word division is criminal lawyer, but meaningfully it should be criminal lawyer. Similarly, there are also instances wherein a lot of ambiguity is created, like stout major's wife. Here, whether the major is stout or his wife is stout is a point of doubt. Hence, word cannot be defined as a semantic unit. So the next aspect is word as an isolable and indivisible unit. So by here, it is done based on the word boundaries. The first possible observable word boundary is potential pause, as there is pause at the end of every word. So if potential pause is considered as a possible definition of word, then it can be seen that it is not foolproof. The speakers may break up and introduce pauses in polysyllabic words, or skip the pauses between two or more closely related words like went to a shop, etc. Then the second aspect, word boundary, is if indivisibility is considered as the definition of a word, then some languages have infixes which are introduced within the word itself. Similarly, some languages have separable affixes too. So word cannot be defined as indivisible. Then coming to the third, if phonetic boundaries like stress, pitch, intonation, juncture, vowel harmony, etc. are considered as the definition of word, then it is also not a universal aspect. For example, in Turkish language, all the vowels in a word must be harmonious in the sense that they should all be either front rounded or unrounded and either back rounded or unrounded. Similarly, based on fixed stress, word can be identified in some languages, but these do not apply to other languages. So the phonetic boundaries too cannot define word. Hence, word as an indivisible unit is not a satisfactory definition. So the term word is set aside and morpheme is used as it is more scientific and is defined as a minimal meaningful unit of a language. It is also classified into two as free and bound. Free morpheme is one which can be independently used, and bound morpheme is one which cannot be independently used. See, for example, boys. Here, boy is a free morpheme and the plural marker s is bound. Two bound morphemes can also be added to a single free morpheme, as in the cases of unintentional, unlikely, etc. So, morpheme replaces word according to the linguistic view. Now, let us consider the view of earlier Sanskrit grammarians and then Panini. Language analysis is done in the texts of Pratishakyam, Siksha, Vyakaranam and Nirukta. Pratishakya refers to those texts which make a study of words of the particular branch of Vedas. Pratishakasu bhavam Pratishakyam. So Pratishakyas deal with everything about the words that are found in that particular branch of Veda. Each and every branch of Veda has its own Pratishakya. Then the Vedangas, Siksha, Vyakaranam and Niruktam also deal with language analysis. Siksha deals with phonetics. Vyakaranam or Padashastram, the science of word, deals everything about word, and etymology is dealt with by Nirukta. We have already seen that there are two main approaches to the definition of a word, and those two are found even in the primitive texts on Vedic literature. The definition of word in terms of semantic unit is given in the Vajasneyi Pratishakyam as Arthaha Padam. Similarly, word in terms of an isolable and indivisible unit by involving swara is given as Swaritavarjam Ekodattam Padam in the same Vajasneyi Pratishakyam, which means Pada is that which has a single Udatta swara and which is devoid of any Swarita swara. So, these two approaches, the aforesaid two approaches of linguists, are seen in the texts of Vedic literature. Then we move on to the concept of Padam of Panini. Vyakaranam is well known as Padashastram. Panini, with due respect for all his earlier grammarians, has systematized his Padashastram or Vyakaranam. Panini retains the term Padam and defines it in terms of morphemes to begin with. He defines the word as Suptingantam Padam in his Ashtadhyayi Sutra 1.4.14. So those which end in sup suffixes and those which end in thing suffixes are called words. So Padam, according to Panini, is twofold as Subanta and Tinganta. Under Subanta we have Pradipadikam plus sup, and under Tinganta we have Dhatu plus Ting Pratyas. And under Subantas, nouns, pronouns, adjectives, numerals and indeclinables are included, and under Tinganta, verbs are included. So all the parts of speech, noun, pronoun, adjectives, verbs, and the left out prepositions, conjunctions, adverbs and interjections are all included under indeclinables. So Panini accommodates all the parts of speech in his twofold Padam. And this is the picture which shows Panini's Padam as referring to the 17 classifications and sub-classifications. And this can be referred to by pausing it. Now, let us look into some of the morphological aspects implied in Panini's Padam. The first striking aspect that is indicated is that there are only bound morphemes in Sanskrit morphology. Na kevala prakriti prayoktavya napicha pratyaha is the rule. So neither the prakriti nor the pratyaya can be independently used. So it is to be used together. So it is a bound morpheme plus a bound morpheme is equal to word. So it is a prakriti plus pratyaya which is equal to a pada. Then what do we mean by prakriti? Prakriti again is of twofold as pradipadikam and dhatu. Pradipadikam is the nominal base and dhatu is the verbal root. And this pradipadikam again is twofold as primary and secondary, and that is explained in the Panini Sutra Arthavada Dhatu Apratyaha Pradipadikam, and the secondary in Krit Tadhita Samasascha. Similarly, the verbal root is also twofold as primary and secondary, derivative, inflectional and derivative. That is being defined in the Sutra Bhuvadayo Dhatavaha, and Sanadhyanta Dhatavaha refers to, explains the derivative verbs. So we saw what Prakriti is, and now we are looking into what Pratyayas are. Under Pratyayas we have Sup and Ting, and these are inflectional suffixes, and we have Krit, Tadhita and Sanadi as derivative suffixes. Apart from this we have three Pratyayas, but they do not have any great impact upon our current discussion, so that is not being referred to here. Then the next aspect is Panini's Suttingantam Padam satisfactorily explains both the inflectional and derivational morphology of Sanskrit language. We already saw that for Subanta Pada, for deriving Subanta Pada, we have to add sup suffixes to the Pradipadikam. Rama plus Su is equal to Ramaha, Matru plus Su is equal to Matha, Pala plus Su is equal to Phalam. These are vowel ending masculine, feminine and neuter, that is being given there in the first box, Pradipadikam plus Sup. In the second we have consonant ending masculine, feminine and neuter, and in the next we have the pronouns. And another important thing, the next box has Sundara, the adjectives. Adjectives are also declined in Sanskrit, that is very important, and it takes the number, case and gender of the noun it qualifies. So Sundaraha, Sundari, Sundaram, it differs. And for numerals also, Ekaha, Eka, Ekam. These are the inflectional nouns. And coming to the derivational nouns, after adding Tadhita suffix to Vasudeva, we have the word Vasudeva, and adding Su to it, we have Vasudevaha. So Vasudevaha is a derivational noun from Vasudeva. From Vasudeva, we have Vasudeva. From Mithila, we have Maithili. From Ahaha, we have Annikam. So both the inflectional and derivational nouns are explained here, and similarly both the inflectional and derivational verbs are also beautifully explained in Panini's definition of Padam. Dhatu plus Ting is equal to Tiganta Padam. So the first block tells about how the tense suffixes are added, and the second tells about how the moods suffixes are added. So this is with regard to the inflectional verbs. And then coming to the derivational verbs, from the root bhu, in the meaning of desiring that. So bhavitum icha is bubusha. Desire to remain is the meaning of that. Adding ti to it, we have bubushati, which means he desires to be there. Kru, from the root kru kar to do, we have chikirsha, kartum icha, desire to do, chikirshati. So desiderative forms. We add ti, sting suffix to it, and get the form chikirshati, which means he desires to do. So this accounts for both the inflectional and derivational verbs. So Panini's Pada beautifully explains both the inflectional and derivational nouns and verbs satisfactorily. And the Sanadhyanta Dhatus, these are the derivational suffixes which has desiderative, causatives, etc. and they are 12 in number. The next important aspect, morphological aspect of Panini's Padam is zero morph or null morph is first introduced and used by Panini. He uses it in the indeclinables. Indeclinables are defined as Sadrisham Trishu Lingeshu Sarvasu cha Vibhaktishu Vachaneshu cha Sarveshu Ennavyeti Tadavyayam. So Avyaya is that which does not have any change in its form, either in the three genders, cases and numbers. So which remains to be constant, which never undergoes any change in its form, is said to be avyaya. So to this, then zeromorph is added. So zeromorph is that which has no phonetic form and it is an invisible affix. So affixes or null morphemes indicates that the derived form does not differ from the stem. So there is no change in the stem at all, even after adding it. For example, the plural form sheep in English. So the singular is also plural. Even after adding the plural form, it remains to be the same sheep. It does not undergo any change. So that is said to be a zeromorph or null morph. The process of adding a null affix is null affixation, null derivation or zero derivation. Now these are the 10 types of avyayas which are there in Sanskritam, and avyayani are twofold as again Sumanta and Tingantas. Avyayas also have primary and secondary, inflectional and derivational, and this deals with the sutras of Panini, who designates avyaya samjna to by the 5 sutras Swaradinipatam avyayam, taditascha sarva vibhaktihi, kranmejantaha, twatosun kasunaha, avyayi bhavascha. So avyaya samjna is ordained and avyayas get the pratipadika samjna. There are 2 types of avyayas we saw. So subanta avyayas get the pratipadika samjna by the sutra arthavadadatu apratyaya pratipadikam, and kridanta avyayas get the pratipadika samjna by the sutra krit tadhita samasascha. And then Panini says that pratyayas are to be added to them by the sutra jna pratipadika, and along with that the sutra swaujasamauchastabhyam visnyebhyam vyasnyasibhyam vyasnyasvosam is to be osup is to be added to that, and pratipadika linga parimana vachana matre pratama makes that it should take up the first case suffixes, and su, au and jas, which are the first case suffixes, are to be added to the avyayas, and by the sutra avyaya the apsupaha null morph is ordained and a zeromorph is added to the avyayas, and the avyayas do not undergo any change at all. So thus Panini has used zeromorph in his grammar. The next aspect is the morphology of Panini. Generally, morphology is viewed as an isolable or independent linguistic aspect, but it is not so in Panini. Panini's Sanskritam has the framework of syntactico-semantic morphology. That is, the word derivation itself is for the purpose of being used in a sentence. So everything is related to the sentential meaning. So the word formation is for the sentence. The notion of word does not correspond to any genuine linguistic primitives or base. Morphological patterns of vocabulary insertion are a direct reflection of syntactic structure, says distributed morphology. Distributed morphology (DM) is a theoretical grammar proposed in 1990 at MIT. It is an interface between morphology and syntax. Words and their internal structures relate to the syntactic structures. Single generative grammar for word and sentence structure is used here. This is very important. Panini is the first one to introduce generative grammar framework, and his generative grammar framework is the same for word and sentence structure. So it is not purely morphological, it is syntactico-semantic morphology, and in fact the very name of the language Sanskritam derives its very significance from this. Samskara yuktam Sanskritam, that which is well refined is Sanskritam. It is refined by the rules of Panini. And what do we mean by samskara? It is karyantara karana yogyata apadana, imparting some merit to something so that it becomes fit to perform another thing. So that is said to be another act. That is said to be samskara. Here refinements are made to the word so that it becomes useful in constructing a sentence. So vakya nirmanartham padam. So the very name Sanskritam shows that the Panini's morphology is syntactico-semantic. So as a conclusion now, I list out all the implications or linguistic implications in the definition of Padam of Panini. It has a twofold classification. It includes all possible parts of speech, reveals the morphological structure as bound plus bound. It need not be just 2, it can be even 3, 4 or 5. It encompasses 17 classifications and subclassifications of Padam. It satisfactorily explains both inflectional and derivational morphology. Zeromorph or null morph is first introduced by Panini. Avyayas are included under Subantas. Morphology is not isolated aspect of language, but it is syntactico-semantic morphology, and words are for sentences. Panini introduces the first model of generative grammar. Panini's advanced linguistic conceptions are very clear from his definition of padam, and distributed morphology is moving towards Panini. Thank you.